Hello, welcome to the BW Businessworld Dialogue. Today we're talking to an author, a professor, an angel investor who's written books on startups, funding, unicorns, now the earnicorns. We have a guest who really is multifaceted. He worked in the industry for decades and then he became a professor at a leading business school. Then he became an angel investor and now he's a prolific author. Let me welcome Professor Dhruv Nath to this BW Businessworld Dialogue.
Thank you so much, Annurag. Great to be here.
Thank you, Professor Dhruv Nath. Congratulations on your latest book. You've become an author. Your first book was about how to get your startup, the funding for your startup. Second book was about who are the dream founders. And this book is about profitable startups. It's called the earnicorns. So take us through your journey of becoming an author.
I've written many books even before these, but on the subject of startups, these are the three so far. So I'll just give you the background. I was a professor at MDI and a lot of my students would come to me and also a lot of alumni and say, sir, please help us. And we've started a company and we want advice, we want guidance. And I would start giving them guidance. And invariably, these questions led to, sir, can we also get some money, right? So this whole issue of funding became high priority. In fact, I have seen that for all startups, the first thing they think of is how do we get funding, first thing. So after advising all these guys, then I also became an angel investor and then I realized that there are certain things that you need to do as a founder to become attractive to the investor and therefore get money. And there are certain things that those who have not been able to get money have failed in, right. And based on that, I wrote my first book, which is right here. Yeah, that's Funding Your Startup. And I actually like the subtitle, And Other Nightmares, because funding is actually a bit of a nightmare. So this is based on my experience with my students, a lot of other founders, a lot of startups that I
And why do you call
personally
funding a
funded. The problem is, actually it should not be a nightmare. The problem is a lot of these young founders have no clue how to raise funding. So for example, they are pre-revenue and they go straight to top-notch VCs. And they say, sir, VCs are not interested, they are not giving us time, or they show interest. And so, they don't know what it means to get funding and therefore they get rejected time after time after time. And that's why it becomes a nightmare. So for example, a very simple thing like founders in many cases do not have an entry barrier. And no investor will ever put in money without seeing a solid entry barrier, right? Otherwise, your competition can just get in and eat you up. And people don't realize that. So because they are not aware of all this, they keep getting rejected and that's why it becomes a nightmare.
So give us the top ways to raise funding for your startup. Okay. Is there a playbook? Are there thumb rules?
So Annurag, in fact, what I have written in all three books, and it started off in this one, which is Funding of Startup. What I have done is I have tried to use my experience with all these founders, both successes and failures, to create a framework, like you said, playbook. And I'll share with you that framework and hopefully it will be of interest and of use to startup founders. So the framework is called Persistent, right? And Persistent is a acronym which means each letter stands for something, right? So I'll take you through these letters one by one. P is problem. Are you solving a problem for somebody? Because if you're not, frankly, you don't have a business, right? And unfortunately, a lot of tech guys particularly create a product and then they say, now what is the problem we are going to solve? That's wrong. You got to solve a problem. So that's P. Then you have E, which is earnings model. Not only should you be solving a problem, but somebody has to be willing to pay you for it, and that's your earning model. Then the S is size of the market. Now, if your market size is small, you will not grow, you will stagnate at some point, and therefore, the investor will not be interested, right. So, you need a large market, but sometimes you have a very large market which is crowded, lots of competition, right. And when you have a crowded market, it is a good idea to identify within that large market a niche, a subset which is large enough, but is not crowded, right. So, that is why I call it a niche, right. So, that is 4 letters. Then scalability, very, very important. If you do not scale and if you do not scale rapidly, the investor will not get the kind of returns that he wants, and therefore, you will not get money, right. So, S for scalability. R is risks, and obviously, every business has risks, and the one of the big risks is the possibility of competition getting in and killing you, for which you need the E, which is entry barrier, something which holds back your competition and keeps them away. And if you have an innovative solution, which is the I in persistent, then for example, if you have a good patent, right, then you have a reasonable entry barrier, right. And the last 2 letters are T and T. So, the first T is team, which is starting with the founders, and the last T is traction, because today investors look for traction. They say, boss, we are not interested in a company which is not proven. Prove to me that you are getting customers, customers are increasing, revenues are increasing, and the same customer is coming back. That is traction. So, this is the persistent model. Frankly, the persistent model is not just if you want to get money, even if you want to create a startup and you are not looking for funding, it is a very good model to follow anyway, right, because it leads to hopefully better chances of a successful startup. And I know a lot of people who started using this, both investors and startups. So, that is the framework which I normally recommend, and that is there in all 3 books.
Beautiful. Now, let me go to the dream founder. Who is a dream founder? Which are the dream founders you have met? And then we will come to your latest book, which is Earnicorns.
So, when I wrote this book on funding your startup, I realized that there were many things which I had left out. And what I had left out was I had not talked about marketing, I had not talked about operations, I had not talked about execution, I had not talked about team building, I had not talked about how you recruit people, how you build your team, how you motivate them to ensure they stay with you, right. So, I realized there were some things that were missing. So, the first book talks about funding, and the dream founder talks about everything else that you need to do, and dream is again an acronym, right. So, D is dream big, right. R is get the right team. Now, team could mean your employees, it could mean your partners, co-founder, distributors, etc., franchisees, whatever. E is execution, right. A, very, very, very important, is attitude on the founder, right. And M, which actually was my favorite, is make opportunities out of crisis. And in fact, during the COVID period, I saw a lot of such dream founders who followed all these these 5 tenets, and they actually converted terrible environment, terrible crisis into an opportunity, and today are doing extremely well. So, a dream founder is one who typically follows these tenets, and I think the biggest one is the last one, make opportunities out of crisis. In fact, I have a story if you think.
Stories get the point, and people remember stories.
So, I know a lot of stories, by the way, and these are all personal investments. So, I invested in a company called Planet Spark. Now, it is a Gurgaon based company, and when they started, they were basically trying to create a professionally run tuition center for children, all right, and they had about 60 branches in Gurgaon. So, they had a lot of content, and they had a nice room, and they had a mentor, and they had laptops. Kid would come, spend an hour and learn, right. So, going along well. Then COVID hit them, right, and in fact, we invested I think 2-3 months before COVID. So, COVID hit them. Now, obviously, when COVID hit them, kids would not come out of the house. Therefore, their business was
Going down.
Absolutely at rock bottom, right. So these guys didn't give up. If I go back to my dream founder, M is make opportunities. What they did was they said, okay, we will now pivot to an online model, which many people have done, right. So they were, I think, into English and maths or English and science, probably English and science, and they pivoted. The problem now is they were competing with the giants of that time, which is people like Byju's and Topper and Vedantu and co. And obviously, a small company cannot compete, right. So they said, hang on, this won't work. They pivoted again, and they said, now let's look at extracurricular. So they tried robotics, they tried programming, they tried, I think they tried arts, they tried music, dance, craft, everything. Nothing worked. But they kept on and on and on trying, right. They were looking for that one opportunity in this crisis, and finally they hit upon something which boomed, right. So when you look at children going to school, the parent typically wants the child to do well in life, right. And so far that has meant good marks in school, or good grades in school, but that's not enough. You need to be able to face the world, you need to be able to talk to people, to address a crowd, to face an interview. So these guys then launched online public speaking for children, and there was such a phenomenal demand, and they were the only guys, right. It boomed, and today they've gone beyond India. They are into the US, they are into the Gulf countries, they are into UK, Australia, European countries, and so on. And they have
Great example of finding a niche within a niche
and
turning a crisis into an opportunity.
Absolutely. And today they are doing they've gone beyond break even, so they are profitable now. So it's a wonderful example of.
Now the earnicorns. Did you make up this term? Did you come up with this term?
Yes, I did. And I need to give you the background. It's a term I like, and a lot of people who read the book like the term. So Anurag, you have been in the thick of the internet industry, but for your viewers, when the internet came in, which is typically the late 90s, early 2000s, there is a very interesting term that came up, which is geography became history. I think that just summarizes everything, because suddenly your customer earlier used to be local, and now your customer could be anywhere. So you could be sitting in Kashmir and your customer could be in Kerala or even somewhere else in the world. So therefore, the opportunity to grow became much larger. Now, when you grow, the economies of scale start kicking in, number one. Number two, you build your word of mouth, you build a brand, and therefore, you are at a major advantage compared to the guys who have not grown, the smaller guys. So the big become bigger and ultimately become market leaders, as you've seen, and the small guys get left out, right. So investors jumped in and they said, hang on, this is wonderful, the internet is going to change the way the world works, and the big are getting bigger, let's focus on growth. Grow at any cost, keep growing, keep growing, keep growing, we'll keep pumping in money. And that kept happening. Unfortunately, growth became growth at any cost, even at a loss. So they said, look, you grow, you become market leader, and you've seen many such companies, you've seen Zomato, you've seen Swiggy and so on, Policy Bazaar, where Byju's, where companies have been growing, but at a loss, right. Now, there were a few guys who said, look, this is not a real company. A unicorn, and many of these companies became unicorn. A unicorn is a mythical animal. These are mythical companies. They had a loss. The moment funding stops, that's the end. So there were a few guys who said, we will make a profit. We'll run a genuine business. And because they are unicorns and they're market leaders, because they are unicorns and they earn money, it is unicorns who earn money. That's how I coined the term earnicorns.
Beautiful.
That's the background.
So, you featured 4 founders and 4 companies there. You featured Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Naukri, you called it the Sanjeev and Hitesh show. You featured Zerodha, which is Nikhil and Nitin Kamath. You featured Dream 11, which is Harsh Jain and his co-founder. You have Zoho. So tell me, why these 4 companies and what's common amongst these earnicorns?
Okay. So, Anurag, I was looking basically for internet companies, because that's where the unicorn
Phenomena,
the
the
phenomenon
earnicorn.
has come up, the earnicorn phenomenon. And I was looking at market leaders. So I found these four to be very apt because they were all market leaders in their field. Dream 11 is almost a monopoly. Zerodha used to be a market leader, it is now number 2, but it is still in terms of volumes of transactions probably the biggest in the world, right. And Naukri of course has a 70% market share in its category. So I was looking for market leaders and founders who the reader can really look up to. So which is where
They
I
stood
zeroed
out.
in on, sorry, they stood
stood
out,
out.
absolutely. So in fact, deciding on these four was a bit of a no-brainer: profitable company, unicorn status, and founders who you can look up to and learn from. So that's really what happened. I think what is common, and there are differences also, which maybe we can get into. What is common, Anurag, is that the founders, all of them were very clear. Their vision was profitable company. It's not a loss making company. It is not a loss making unicorn. And I think Nitin Kamat's phrase sums it up very, very well. He says they never took money, by the way. They never got investor
Yeah, there is
money.
a chapter says because we won't take money, we need to make money. So I found that very real and fascinating.
We didn't
Go
take
on.
money, so we had to make money. So the vision saying we have to make profitable companies. I think the second important thing was they ran very, very frugal businesses, very, very frugal business. And I'll take an example. Maybe I'll take an example from Zoho, right. Now, or let me take an example from Zerodha. So, Zerodha, when they started, they said we will not spend any money on marketing, right, and they have never spent money on marketing, no significant amount. And as you know, in this kind of business, marketing is one of the biggest chunks of your expenses. Customer acquisition, right. Nitin Kamath said two things. He said, number one, we will see, they have been traders for several years before they started Zerodha. He says, we will take care of the problems people face in online trading, and therefore the customer will be happy. We will give him services that the customer wants and is not able to get elsewhere. So the customer comes to us, word of mouth will kick in, and he'll keep coming back to us.
No fee.
That was the key thing. So he says, this is an important issue. When he started, he says, traders typically, the brokerage would charge a fee of whatever 1.5 whatever percent, right. Now 1% is wonderful if your trading value is 1000 rupees, but that's not normally the case. If it is 1 lakh or 10 lakhs, then your 1% is 10,000 rupees. So the trader who does multiple trades in a day, right, is losing 10,000 rupees because that's going to the broker. So that percentage is highly misleading. And Nitin said, I want to change this, flat 20 rupees. Suddenly traders woke up and said, my God, suddenly we can make far more money. So that became a kind of avalanche. The press also picked it up, and I would imagine Businessworld also picked it up, and everybody was talking about it. So
they both won our 40 under 40. They applied, and this was 4 years back.
So these guys, they did not need to market, and then they came up with zero brokerage later. Again the press went wild. So the press has been doing marketing for them, word of mouth has been doing marketing for them, and that is how they have not needed to spend on marketing, and today they are very profitable. I think their latest results, the financial year 24 results,
more than 4,000 crores profit.
Absolutely, 4,000 crore profit on a 7,000 crore turnover. That's about 60%. That's phenomenal. 4,000 crore PAT is, unheard of.
So there are, as you in the last chapter talk about the similarities between them. Give us a sense of similarities, and then you also talk about the dissimilarities. So give us a sense of both.
So I'll give you an example of similarities. One of the similarity, two of them are the fact that the founders are very clear. We want to run a profitable business, and therefore we will run a frugal business, right. So those two are common across all four. The third common factor was they really looked after their teams, right. Now, I'll take an example, and this is true across the board, all 4 companies, and I'll give you an example from maybe Dream 11. You know, Dream 11 is into the business of fantasy sport, which basically means, just for your audience, so let's say there is a cricket match going on between India and Australia, and therefore there are 22 players playing. Now, you on Dream 11 can pay a little bit and select your team out of these 22, right. So, you have a team of 11, and this team could include people from Australia or India. So, you could have David Warner, you could also have Virat Kohli, you could also have Bumrah, that is your team, you are a selector. And then when Virat Kohli hits a century, or if he hits a century, you get points, right. If Bumrah takes wickets, you get points. If somebody drops a catch, you lose points, right. And ultimately, of all the players who are playing this fantasy sport game, they look at who has got the maximum points, and all these people will get the prize money, right. So, that is how it works, and it was a profitable business. COVID, now in COVID there were no games, right. If there are no real sports, there can be no fantasy sports, because there is nothing on which to base it. So, revenues came down to almost 0. They had a little bit of revenue from elsewhere, but almost 0. You know, Harsh Jain made a very phenomenal statement, which I have captured in this book, Earnicorns. He says, during good times, you have looked after the company. He was talking to his people. Now, during bad times, the company will look after you, right. There were no mass layoffs. See, in the internet world, when your business is not doing well, the first thing you do is lay off 500, lay off 1000. The only variable is the number that you lay off, but layoff is common.
What are the other common factors?
Okay. The other interesting common factor is very, so by the way, let me just complete this. So, these guys did not lay off anybody, and you will not believe this, their manpower turnover is a minuscule 4% per year. Now, for an internet company, that is an Olympic record. I mean, I have never heard of it. I have seen a lot of internet companies. So, that is how they look after their people. People stay with them. They are very highly motivated. They do a great job. Therefore, they do not need to recruit people. Costs also come down. Productivity is high, costs down, profitable company, right. So, all of them are common. The other factor which is very common is focus on the customer. Look after the customer, keep him happy, give him what he wants. And I will take an example from maybe Zoho, Sridhar Vembu, who is the founder of Zoho. So, he has a very interesting statement which is up there on the website. He says, the customer's data belongs to the customer. Okay? We have nothing to do with it. We will not use it, we will not sell it, it will not leak out from our premises, right. Now, this is a SaaS company, which means their software has to run on some servers, and it used to run on data centers which were outsourced, right. So, Sridhar says, look, I have made this statement, but I strongly believe the data should not leak out. However, it is in a data center which I have no control over. I will get into the data center business. So, they actually have their own data centers now, right. A software company creating their own data center, and by the way, they are also creating their own DBMS, right, which they are using now. So, everything is geared towards making sure the customer's data does not get leaked out.
And what are these uniqueness, what are the dissimilarities?
Very interesting. I think the biggest dissimilarity is in the way they approached money, funding, external funding. Zerodha and Zoho, the two Zs, never took investor money. Sridhar very famously said, he says, look, in fact, there is an incident which I have mentioned here. He says, look, when investors, when you take investor money, they get involved in running the company. Okay? And he says, there was one investor who came to me who said, look, I need an exit after X years. I said, look, how can I promise that exit to you? I have to run the company, right? your investor viewpoint may be completely different from what the company needs, right. So, that is what he said. Nitin Kamath very similar in Zerodha. So, he never took money. On the other hand, and by the way, Naukri was somewhere in between.
Yeah, I know a story. Sanjeev says someone in early days offered him 8 crores and he counted how much, Nirula's, I think he said chocolate fudge ice creams will come. And he went back and said to him, I don't think we are ready to take this money.
So, they did take some money. Dream 11 is different. They took money 8 times. So, they
raised $800 million.
Yeah. And Nitin and Sridhar are clear. One of the best decisions they have taken is not taking external money. Harsh Jain of Dream 11 says one of the best decisions we took was taking investor money. And the reason he gives is, he says, look, we were youngsters. We did not know how to run a business. We were just spending money and not reaching anywhere. So, we have learnt from investors, and our investors were, we are grateful to them for having guided us on how to build this business. So, one of the best decisions. So, I think the biggest thing which stood out for me was, somebody says best decision not taking money, somebody else says best decision taking money.
Beautiful. I think the DNA of each company is unique, the idea is unique, the way they work is unique. Now, let us focus on the 4 companies that you have. You start with the Naukri story, Sanjeev and Hitesh story. Tell me what stands out about that earnicorn.
I think the biggest thing which stands out, if you ask me, Anurag, see, all these things apply to them. They are a very persistent business, they are very customer focused, they are frugal, etc., etc. To me, the biggest thing that stands out is the phenomenal level of ethics in that company. I mean, I can't think of a better model than Sanjeev and now also Hitesh. I will give you an example. Sanjeev, who was the founder of, is the founder of InfoEdge Naukri, he was offered a seat, a board seat on the board of directors of Make My Trip. And he and Deep Kalra of Make My Trip are good friends, close friends. So, normally when you are offered a board seat, you are given some kind of fee, but Sanjeev was offered ESOPs. Now, in Make My Trip, Sanjeev said, he says, look, when I attend a board meeting or when I prepare for a board meeting at Make My Trip, I am not spending my time. I am spending time that belongs to my company InfoEdge Naukri. Therefore, I will take the shares, but I will take them in the name of Naukri or InfoEdge, right. And he did that, and that story is there in the book. Ultimately, they sold these shares and they made a reasonable profit. But the fact that he is so ethical, so upfront, and Hitesh is similar, means.
By the way, they are related and they are related.
They are related. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but that doesn't change anything that you say about them. Outstanding professionals, outstanding leaders, and their track record speaks for them. And Hitesh is outstanding too.
Hitesh was my junior from IIT, but I never ranked him. He was too many years junior to me. I think he was about 18 or 19 years junior to me. So.
Now, let us move to Zerodha, the Kamaths. Yeah. What stands out about them as an earnicorn?
Okay. So, I think the one thing which stands out, I have already mentioned his.
Are they a purple cow? Because there is no other company like them.
There, you are right, you are right. I think one of the key things in Nitin Kamath's case and also his brother Nikhil is their ability to take very quick decisions. Okay, and I will give you an example. They had started off with offering traders 20 rupees fee for every transaction, right. Now, I need to explain for your audience the difference between a trader and an investor, right. An investor is a guy who puts in money into the stock market, and I mean, it may be there for 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It's a long term thing, and he'll do a few transactions, very few transactions. The trader, on the other hand, will probably do multiple transactions in a day, and therefore lots and lots of trades. What these guys realized when they had this 20 rupee fee is that the total money in terms of fees that they were getting from traders was 99% of their revenues, and from investors only 1%, because the investors did very few trades, right. So, once Nitin and one of his co-founders, Kailash, and one more colleague, they were sitting in the lounge of the Bangalore airport on the way to some other town, and suddenly Nitin had an idea, and they were having beer and mumphali, peanuts. Nitin had an idea. He said, boss, guys, not boss. He says, look, we are getting 1% revenue from our investors. Why don't we make the fee for investors 0? And we just charge that 20 rupee fee for traders. And suddenly these guys said, hang on, Nitin has gone mad. But when he explained this to them, they realized it was a master stroke, because
the power of data
absolutely.
And power of intuition, the power of taking a fast decision.
And they took it there. Next morning it was implemented, right? And suddenly the press went wild.
That's the advantage of founders who take quick decisions.
And he says, I couldn't have done this if I had had investors.
Now, what is the unique thing about Harsh Jain's Dream 11?
I think the one thing, and I've already shared one story, maybe I'll share one more, is the way in which they have built their team and the way they look after their people. I'll share one more example. You know, when these guys recruit manpower, so it's a technical company, internet company, so they need a lot of programmers. They are not looking for programmers. They don't recruit programmers. They recruit people who are passionate about sports and are also programmers, right? And they say, this is the only place where
you can get both.
Get both.
Confucius said, make your hobby your profession. You don't have to
Exactly. Your passion, come and program for
the
sports.
Ikigai.
You know, and they have, exactly, Ikigai. And they have created, have you seen their office in BKC in Bombay? You should go there sometime. If you want, I'll put you in touch with Harsh Jain. Maybe you can do a story on that.
I know him well. He was our impact person of the year. And,
okay.
And
whenever you go to Bombay, see
20th Jan, possibly I'll be seeing him, because my son has requested him for an interview. So you will travel to Bombay. Maybe
go to their office. So it's in BKC, and when you walk into a football field.
Wow, beautiful.
Small football field, goalpost at one end, and when you're waiting for somebody, you're sitting on the sofa in the goalpost, right? Then you walk in further, the entire office is covered with not, wall-to-wall carpeting or marble flooring.
AstroTurf.
It is AstroTurf.
So it's a sports, beautiful.
So everything is sports. You have basketballs hanging.
You also talk about culture.
The culture there is that they try and ensure that there is no hierarchy. Obviously, there has to be some hierarchy, but
there has to be some structure.
No, correct. There has to be some structure, but they try and avoid hierarchies. And I'll give you another story. In this office in BKC, when I went to meet these guys, I asked them, I said, look, where is Harsh's cabin? There is no cabin. So I said, where does he sit? Come, I'll show you. So that lady who was guiding me, she took me to a cabin, not a cabin, workstation. There were 2 workstations identical to all the other workstations, identical. Only thing is, it said Harsh Jain and Bhavit Shah, who is the co-founder. Now, this is democracy. So, the culture is, it's not that we are superior to you, it's not that we are the bosses and therefore you are, we know everything, you don't. You are a youngster. If you are good, if you are, prove yourself, we'll go along with what you say. So, the culture is everybody is involved, everybody is happy, and that's why people don't leave.
And the last earnicorn is Zoho, and you haven't been able to interview him or didn't interview him. Yeah, you didn't meet him, but what comes across unique about Zoho?
Yeah. So, I couldn't
and
meet
the founder.
Yeah. So, I couldn't meet Sridhar, but I've met a lot of his senior guys. So, what comes out is absolutely, completely I mean, thinking which is so innovative, it is completely out of the box, right? And I'll share an example with you. Sridhar says, see, it's a SaaS company, therefore they need programmers. He says, why do programmers have to be engineers? Why can only engineers make good programmers? So, what he did was, he set up something called Zoho Schools in Tamil Nadu, and he says, we will take in, you know, in rural Tamil Nadu, rural, any part of the country, any state in India, you have a huge number of very bright young people. Unfortunately, because of family finances, they are not able to go beyond class 10 or class 12. He says, we will select people from there, class 12 is your entry point, don't do a degree because you can't afford it, join Zoho Schools, don't pay, we will give you a stipend. And these guys, they are highly motivated, highly charged up, they don't leave, turnover is very, very low, very high productivity, and he has absorbed about 1500 such people from Zoho Schools into the company. Now, this is unique in the, I think, in the software world. Getting people from rural Tamil Nadu to be trained up, they haven't got a degree, but they are doing phenomenally well. So, I think this, you know, this business of I will not follow the beaten path, I will do something which, it's a little like Elon Musk, I will do something which is unique.
Brilliant. Now that you've written 3 books, you've written how to get funding for your startup, the Dream Founders, and now the Earnicorns. What is the next book? Okay. Is there a 4th book coming?
Yes. Actually, this is Earnicorns was my 7th book because there were 4 before this. Oh, sorry, 3.
But I have read these 3.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And these are the ones about startups.
Yeah,
in that
these are the
context of funding, startups, founders.
So, now I will be writing about earnicorns again, because I realize a lot of people are now getting into this mode of becoming
last
earnicorns.
2 years there was a funding winter and there was a paradigm shift from being loss making to a path to profitability, whether you were doing a listing or you were looking at the next round. So, to a path to profitability was important, and it has led to a lot of startups becoming profitable. So, clearly there are many more earnicorns.
They are becoming earnicorns and I am catching them for the
Brilliant.
next book.
As we end, you also have been a very prolific angel investor. Are there some rules to angel investing that you follow? What are your learnings as an angel investor?
So, first of all, you know, when I spoke to you in the beginning about the persistent model, that has taken me years to learn. So, when I started investing, that must have been about 15 years back, maybe more. A lot of the investing was based on gut feel, excitement. We didn't realize things like this. So, we, you know, things like entry barrier was, I mean, nobody even thought of it, and I am not just talking of myself. I think it's true for every investor, it's a learning process, right. The fact that the business has to be scalable, and the fact that you need more and more technology to make it scalable and less manpower dependence, right. The fact that you need to see some level of traction, pre-revenue companies are very high risk. So, I would say what I have learned gets very.
And how do you get exits?
Yeah, that is important. So, let me put it like this.
As my wife famously says, you become an investor when you have exits, not when you invest.
Because my wife feels the same way, and I will tell her this. You are absolutely right. So, you know, one of the things which is extremely important, or 2 of the things, is if you follow the persistent model and you have an an entry barrier and scalability, you scale. If you scale rapidly and the market size is large enough, there will be investors who come in at different points, because they believe the market size is still larger and it is scalable. So, when they invest, they expect the next investor to come in and the next. So, if you follow this and the market size is large enough and you are scalable, you can expect investors to come in at some stage, and at some stage some investor is going to say, look, I do not want all these early stage guys, let them get knocked out, I will return their money to them with whatever valuation is expected, and the rest of the money I will put into the company. So, I would say if you are following this model, your chances of getting an exit obviously improve.
Fantastic. It's been great talking to you, Professor Dhruv Nath.
Thank you
Look
so
forward
much.
to your 4th book, but till then, read the Earnicorns by Professor Dhruv Nath. The soon to be Earnicorns is his next book. So we look forward to wisdom and experiences and story in the fourth book. But till then, read the third book.